So many of us are trying to regulate our nervous system. We're taking supplements, we're doing breath work, cold plunges, boundaries, all the things. But what if the deeper issue isn't regulation techniques? What if it's perceived safety? Hi, I'm Jenny. Today I'm going to be cooking a Texas brisket, and we're going to talk about not only how perceived safety fixes it, but how God's the ultimate answer to that. Let's get into it. First of all, we have to really understand what the nervous system is. And for me, it was something that I didn't care that much about or didn't think was that important. As a Christian, I focus more on the spiritual aspect of things and on the mind aspect of things. And I didn't really understand how much the body really impacted or mattered, how the three integrated together. Most of us in the church have pretty coping mechanisms, and that means that we don't usually turn to like alcohol and drugs and hookers whenever we are under chronic stress. Sometimes we turn to things like overperforming, people pleasing, like worrying too much about what people think, or committing to things that we shouldn't be committing to. And I had to learn this the hard way. Recently, I went through an all-out nervous breakdown. Now, I didn't know the definition of a nervous breakdown. I just knew that things were out of control, that things felt so intense, that emotionally I couldn't regulate, that if I got triggered, that I was like triggered the rest of the day. I lost all regulation because my nervous system was so weighed down. And it was a combination of years and years of taking on more and more onto my plate for various reasons, because it felt like these different things. And I didn't realize there was actually an internal coping mechanism underneath that looked very godly, that was reliable, that was going to be able to do things for people, that didn't need to be compensated and all these things. And that God wasn't actually asking my nervous system to take one for the team. And I had to learn the hard way that we really do have a nervous system. We really do have a body, and it can really get dysregulated. And sometimes inside the walls of the church, that looks very different than out in the world, but it still matters and it's still there. And until we can see it, we can't deal with even the pretty looking coping mechanisms that we're carrying. And whenever I finally experienced my own nervous system breakdown and all that entailed, I started realizing how important the body was and how it all connected together. And I think when you understand not only how the nervous system works, but how it interplays spiritually with you, then you're going to understand how God is truly the answer. The thing is, your nervous system isn't broken, it's just protecting you. Nervous system's job is to check for threats, to monitor your surrounding environments, to make sure that nothing is going to eat you or hurt you from back in the day. And whenever we have some sort of threat detection, its job is to sense that threat and to rise the cortisol. Well, the stress response is driven by the hippocampus axis, which releases the cortisol when threats perceived. But the thing is that we don't want like constant cortisol release, because we need also for our nervous system to relax so that it can go into a state where it feels safe for rest and digest. If we are always on cortisol, always running high, then we're going to have sleep disruption, or going to feel on edge and anxious all the time. And so we are perceiving something that's unsafe that's causing this spike in cortisol. So we can do all of these practices, which will help kind of trick the body into thinking it's safer so that we can rest more. But ultimately, there's a deeper solution. And that's what I want to talk to you about. But first, I just have to share that when I really started understanding the nervous system, I started recognizing how what I was doing was impacting it, so that I could start protecting my nervous system, kind of like budgeting my nervous system energy so that I don't overdo it on myself. If you are a doer, and especially if you're like a mom that's trying to manage children and home and relationships and work and things like that, it's really hard to not overextend and overuse the budget that your nervous system gives you. And the older that we get, the less budget that we have for our nervous system, unfortunately. You see, the nervous system doesn't just respond to physical danger, it responds to relational danger. That means that if you perceive that you're under attack relationally, it's going to respond like you're under attack from a bear. If you feel alone, abandoned, misunderstood, unsafe, your nervous system reacts as if you were in danger. But what if God was meant to be our deepest place of safety and attachment? And from that security with Him, if we have that deep, secure attachment with Him, that the perceived attachments that feel like they're abandoning us or blaming us or triggering us or whatever don't feel so heavy, because we are securely attached with him. You see, scientists have proven that the way that you feel with emotional pain can actually match physical pain. In many ways, the nervous system can't really differentiate between physical and emotional pain. And so it reacts in the same way to protect us. So the thing is that in our closest relationships, in the relationships we're in, those are the ones that are obviously going to be the ones that trigger our feeling of abandonment or unsafety or rejection or fear or misunderstanding. And that's what's going to drive the cortisol and the disconnection. So what's the answer? Well, actually, if you are coming from a view of feeling safe, feeling known, and feeling completely protected in one certain most secure relationship in your life, then you don't feel as vulnerable to things happening in other places. For instance, if I had like a super rich father and he doted on me, he loved me, he believed the best in me, and he always took care of me. He was super like muscle building and he was protective. With him, I would always feel safe. And so if I had other people like yelling at me or threatening me and he's next to me, I'm not going to perceive the danger as highly as being alone and vulnerable because I have my big protective father that will whip anyone's butt. Does that make sense? Or if something gets taken from me or stolen from me, then I'm not overwhelmed and devastated like that's my last dollar and there's no one to provide for me because I know that my daddy is going to take care of me and that he's not going to let me go without. And so I can rest and trust. Yeah, it was like annoying, but it's not life crippling to have things happen. So when we perceive that we have this secure attachment with this person that will never leave us or forsake us and that will protect us and provide for us in abundant ways, then when things happen on earth with our earthly relationship, they're not so damaging. They're not so overwhelming. And so the problem is that you can't get secure attachment through information alone. You see, it's experientially that our brain got wired, our nervous system got wired to teach us what's dangerous and what's a threat emotionally and relationally, because there were emotional places and relational places in our history where we felt rejected, where we felt alone, where we felt misunderstood. These places produce pain. And so they are kind of this lens that we're looking through that's scanning for threat that already knows what it's like to feel alone or rejected, abandoned, misunderstood, blamed, accused, these different things. And so it's almost like gun shy, like just waiting for the ball to drop. And so sometimes it's going to perceive things that aren't even there and are or not even the intention of the other person because we're just living through our own reactive lens. So the problem is that information does not change our wiring. Information is a good way for us to, after the fact, calm ourselves down, talk ourselves off the ledge. And we should do that. And we should choose to do the right thing and to have self-control. But there's deeper than just choosing with willpower. There's actually a way to walk in such integration with God that there's an inner transformation of stability where where the fruit of the spirit actually flow out of us, love, joy, and peace from our heart, and not that we have to try and produce them inside of ourselves or on the outside for others. And so the way to really reintegrate and to be able to really have God as our secure connection is through encountering him, through experiencing his goodness, through recognizing him at work. And that can happen in a lot of different ways, but it's moving from this place of information. I spent a long time just having daily quiet times, reading the word, praying my prayer list. I even spent a season of my life, 40 hours a week, studying the Bible verse by verse, really growing in head knowledge. And it didn't change my heart issues because I still had such wrong perceptions, even of God. So when we try to use information as a way to integrate with God, it doesn't work. It would be like if I was friends with someone on Facebook and they wrote lots and lots and lots of stuff on their Facebook, and I read every single thing. I studied what they said. I knew what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy. I knew how they felt about things. I responded all the time. Like I wrote on their wall all the time. That's like praying, like we're talking to them, we're talking to them, we're talking to them. And I'm reading what they're posting. They're not necessarily talking directly to me, but there's such a difference between being like a dedicated fan and having a personal encounter and relational encounter with someone to have a secure attachment, we literally have to have interaction. And it's in interaction that we actually feel cared for, that we feel seen, that we feel known, that we really know what it's like to be loved and to be cherished and to be safe and to be provided for. And then it becomes more believable in those moments that we don't feel that. So we can live from a place of security experientially and not just logically. The easiest way to understand the nervous system and understand what I'm saying is an analogy. And so let's use a car as an analogy. Imagine your nervous system is the engine management system of a car. Its job is to monitor fuel levels, temperature, oil pressure, external conditions, and it makes adjustment to keep the car running safely. So this would be like your lived experience. Your system has made adjustments to keep you safe, when to brace, what to look for. And so we're still living from that place of brace with all of our systems locked down. So your lived experiences actually are like the beliefs, and the beliefs would be like the car's onboard software. And so it's making adjustments to keep you safe, to make sure that the brakes break at the right point and things like that. And so your beliefs have programmed the car, which is like your nervous system. And so cortisol in our body, our stress hormone, would be like fuel injection. It helps the car whenever it really needs like a boost of energy to like fight, flight, freeze, like run, fight for your life from a bear. But if you're constantly flooding the car with this fuel injection, the parts wear down. Our bodies wear down. We're not supposed to be in constant stress. So, what's integration with God? It's not just learning head knowledge. That would be like updating the car's manual, but not actually reprogramming it. And so, with God, we learn new driving experiences that are safe. And so, the system can adjust. It knows that it's no longer icy outside. We're no longer getting those, fuel injector boost of cortisol into our system. We really are learning not just knowledge wise, but experientially, that the conditions are safe because we have the driver with us that will protect us from everything. A software update would be like a belief shift. And this happens through encounter with God. So, those new driving experiences are kind of like our on earth relational experiences with each other and with God. And through new experiences of learning safety and learning that we matter and that we're cared for and that we're protected and that we're provided for, then our system can kind of reprogram where we are more efficient, where we're not revving our engine, where we're not locked down. And so our nervous system can calm down because it's no longer fighting for our lives, because it knows that it's deeply held and trusted. And so this can't happen just through information alone. If it could, then the Pharisees wouldn't have rejected Jesus. They were so dedicated to the word, they had it all right. But Paul himself was a murderer because he was so deceived, because he didn't have that relational encounter with Jesus yet. It wasn't until he had that encounter that it really shifted everything. And so Jesus didn't die just to give us information and heavenly freedom. He died to bring us into wholeness now, and that's available now. But it happens through personal daily intimacy and encounter with God, not just head knowledge alone. Now, none of this discounts the fact that the car still needs fuel. That if you run your car, rev it constantly, or even just drive it regularly and smoothly for a long period of time, that you're not going to need an oil change or you're not going to need a fuel up. And so our bodies do have limits. They do still have physical limits. But when the software is properly programmed, it can be so much more efficient and run for so much longer with less breakdown. Live from this place of really being able to be steady because the Lord is with us. And now we're not no longer in this perceived threat mode. Things don't feel as much like a threat. And when things don't feel as much like a threat, we're not getting those fuel injectors flooded, right? And so the cortisol's not in us. And so then we rest better. We digest better. We don't feel emotionally overwhelmed. Our nervous system isn't like it's on fire constantly. And so while taking Epsom salt baths and cold plunges and supplements and having the right boundaries and language is helpful protection mechanisms to pad ourselves from being overwhelmed, it is not dealing with the core root problem. And when we deal with the core root problem, yes, life sometimes still gets intense and maybe we need to have different strategies, but ultimately we are operating from a place of more wholeness and a properly aligned engine software. Does that make sense? If you're like, Jenny, I understand now, I can see how God's the answer, but I don't actually know how to have intimate encounter and hear back and forth from God. Don't worry, that's where I was for years. I was so frustrated and so overwhelmed that I've spent the last 8 years of my life learning how to remove what's blocking me from God and being able to hear from Him clearly. And I'm going to help you do that. I will teach you how to have actual intimacy with God and instead of just information about Him. Check out the link below.